Hello, my name is Shiva Kumar, and thanks for watching Umoja Shots, where we deconstruct a complex solution in a simple and understandable form, taking one issue at a time. Today, we are going to deliver an executive overview of operating model in HR. It's going to be a story, a presentation, and it's going to give you a perspective. Let's start with a story. If I ask you, any one of you, about this picture, you can very well say what it is right now. It was not so until December 7th, 1972, when this picture was taken by the crew of Apollo 17, approximately 45,000 kilometers away from Earth. This picture shows the vastness of the water body right from the Mediterranean to Alaska and to the icy Arctic South Pole. Even though it was well known that the water mass of the Earth was three times bigger than the land, up until then there were no such pictures to show that. This picture was coined the name Blue Marble by NASA. Till date, this was one of the most circulated and appreciated pictures in the world. The main reason was it changed the perspective of the mankind, how we looked at our own planet, admiring the vastness of blue water. The perspective change is much needed for us to appreciate things of this nature. Umoja project is one like that. This transformational project will develop and deliver top-notch transactional and reporting services which should be considered in a global scale, something like a global delivery model. Well, if you ask Gartner on a global delivery model, this is what they are going to say. The optimum combination of processes, end-to-end methodologies, and quality procedures with high quality skills and resources available internally or externally in requisite quantities on a global basis that enables organizations to maximize the quality of their solutions while minimizing the overall cost and delivery time of the IT services. To us and me, what matters is the foundation component that drives this end result, and they are all governance, organizational structure, organization operational procedures, and performance management. As the characteristics say, the governance sets the executive oversight and organizational policies. An organizational structure determines the organizational designs, manages the roles and responsibilities, and also deploys the centralized and decentralized activities. And operational procedures which are built on enterprise architecture, and they develop and deliver consistent transactional services and has a very specific and clear geographic focus. And the performance management on the tag end is the framework which delivers the cost performance transparency for the entire solution, and this will also be a tool which is used to take corrective action as a feedback loop to the other pillars. In my presentation today, we are going to focus on organizational structure and operational procedures and how they can be leveraged and how the journey of leveraging these two components to deliver the options for a top-notch service delivery model. When all started in 2012, we sat down with the HR leadership and to jot down the HR service delivery model, how they are envisioning. You have HR systems, HR applications, and HR processes, and the HR leadership is in the center of the whole thing. The HR leadership wants to deploy three forks, namely the HR shared services, which is taken care by the HR professionals, and also build what is called HR centers of excellence based on the applications and the processes, and develop a set of HR business partners who will be the liaison between the business and the application projects and IT. And then we sat down with them and asked them exactly what are all the pain points in delivering this type of a model. They are, first, they realize this particular model is not strategically driven because the HR shared services and centers of excellence, and including the HR leadership, were focusing too much on operational HR and they were not able to align themselves strategically. Number two, the HR capability as of today were lacking the staff ownership. Majority of the ownership lies in the hands of HR professionals. The limitations to provide the top-notch transactional services was considered as a drawback in the sense, even though there was a lot of transactional services which are available in the legacy systems as well as the field systems, there was a strong urge to identify that these services were not capable enough to deliver the top-notch service delivery model. And a limited satisfaction in self-service technology by employees and managers. So what the leadership thought was the availability of the employee self-service functionality as well as the manager functionality were very limited, and they identified as the islands of automation as against a very well constructed and uniformly deployed services. The lack of support for the line managers to manage what they can manage with the information what they have and the resources what they can manage. And the last is the ineffective geographic focus, because they felt the legacy systems were built around the instances of their IT systems. So there were no true geographic focus. However, the geographic focus was implied based on the instances. With those expectations, I sat down and came up with a model which is called HR Service Delivery Model Umoja Enabled, in which we did not want to change the overall architecture. However, we moved the component from operational to strategic. What we did was the HR shared services was enabled by Umoja right now, and it will have multiple tiers of services internally available, so that majority of the transactional services taken care in that area. And the HR centers of excellence, they kind of moved into more strategic, and also the HR leadership was kind of moved towards the strategic directions. The idea was to still continue with the HR business partners, however small in number, to make the business continuity and improvement in place. After we decided on this model, we started building a roadmap of how to make this a realization. Step one was foundation. In the foundation, we sat down with the top management from the HR side to make sure the four areas are covered. Number one, we wanted to make sure this transformation should be a top down and requires a management directive and decisions. Number two, the strategic direction should also be built along with a governance process and must be clearly and explicitly defined. And the reliance and following up on a model should be on a fact-based decisions as against a heuristic decision. And the workload shift, where some locations must shed transactional services to drive and implement a new approach. The HRM leadership gracefully accepted all these things, and they gave us the go to the next step, which is called a drawing board. In the drawing board, all we started was two things. One, SAP as an application, and Umoja as the business process container. And we were figuring out which part of this software will allow us to seamlessly deliver the service delivery model. In SAP, the organizational structure is the only hierarchical structure which is consistent and which can be used by the processes to deliver the service delivery model. However, SAP has two forms of organization structure. One is called enterprise structure, which controls the financial part of the business, and the organizational structure, which controls the HR part of the business. In a private sector organization, 99% of the time, both of them will be same. However, in the public sector, it tends to differ. So, to bridge the gap, we had to build what is called an operative structure, which shadows over the organizational structure to give some of the facilities, the flexibilities that can be leveraged to deliver the services with managing the expectations and managing the exceptions. Going to the third stage of architecture, we started developing what is called an enterprise role against the task-based role. An enterprise role is nothing but a collection of, it started with as a job, and later on it's kind of diluted to something called a job function, which can be uniquely defined and it should be uniquely assignable to a user. In this initial construct, we were focusing only on assigning enterprise role to the users and not to the positions, depending upon the organizational maturity with the organizational structure. And also, we made very clear the enterprise roles were categorized as a drafting applications, approving applications, and monitoring and managing application. The reason for that in the architecture is every time when we assign to the users, it can give a very clear understanding and the design. The number of drafting roles assigned to users in an entity should be proportional to the number of transactions happening in that entity or an operating center. Similarly, the number of approving or certifying officers in an entity should be proportional to the budget allocated to that particular entity. And also, the number of roles which have been assigned to, with the monitoring and managing roles should be proportional to the managers and the leadership. And then we moved on to the next step of building the service delivery model. The building of the service delivery model purely focused on the processes. We took the headquarters as our example, as our guinea pig, and we took the OHRM part of the business and the executive office of the business and started writing down all the processes which is done by either of these two departments. And we came up with a list of processes wherein there were a lot of overlaps between the processes, how they are handled, and also there are certain things which are done completely interwoven. So we went back to the OHRM leadership and explained them it is impossible to come up with this type of a granularity, and they gracefully adopted with one single construct called HR partner, which comprises of all the services who can create and approve. And also we came up with another role called HR administrators, who will be administering these processes on behalf of a staff member because of the employee self-service. And if there is a lack of employee self-service, HR administrator will fill in the gap. Once we have identified the bill for process, we started extending the enterprise role by implementing what is called controls. By implementing various controls, we came up with 5 variations. It started with self-service, where employees, staff, and the managers will have the self-service, so they can have their own team, they can do their own work on life events. The next one was a global enterprise roles. The global enterprise role control allows the person who is having that role to act on anybody in Umoja system. And then number 3 is the central roles or uniquely identifiable roles, which are controlled either by headquarters, which might be a New York headquarters, or in certain specific headquarters location or center of excellence locations. Next is the entity control roles, where these roles are assigned at the highest level within an entity. And the next one is within the entity is it can apply to the lower levels of entity. For example, the entity level roles could be HR partner and budget administrator roles. And within entity are the time managers and OM administrators or time administrator roles. As we did it, we also had a little bit of a space in the picture, and I think you guessed it correctly, which is meant for operations center. An operations center is a organic extension of existing controls, and if the control is more than one entity, then it automatically goes into operations center model. And all these models are applicable to PA, OM, time, benefits, payroll, and travel functionalities in the UE1 space of Umoja project. We talk about the next step called provisioning. Once we have constructed a role and once we have constructed the controls, when we assign a role to a user, we give 2 things. One is the user access, which is defined by the enterprise role and which dictates what they can do. And also the structural authorization of the control points, which dictates where you can do the job. So this provisioning is organically extended as a step 6, and the step 7, with all the 6 steps, we were able to do the deployment and implemented the solution in various ways so far. Number 1 is standalone, where we did it for MINUSTA and ESCAP in Bangkok. Operation Center model is built for Nairobi Operations Center, consisting of UNON, UNEP, and UN Habitat, and a hybrid solution where entity UNACOT is managed by New York when it comes to the PA side of the business and managed by ESCAP when it comes to the payroll. And the exception is like once in Umoja, which is a transitional phase till cluster 5 up until everybody comes on board into Umoja transactional system. And with all these things, now we are ready for cluster 4. Before going into the details, let me explain an example of the payroll function. The payroll function, by this we define, is actual payroll function defined within SAP, which is kind of a cusp in between the finance, HR, and treasury. So when the payroll information is entered in the system, when the payroll information such as like additional payments are entered by the payroll administrators, the payroll function basically runs the simulation, make sure the payroll list is correct, make sure the budget is available to dispatch the run the payroll, and make sure all the entries, all the deductions are up to date and correct. Once all these things are done, the payroll is done and the payment is distributed through the treasury function. The payroll function is unique to the SAP in the sense it is not controlled by an organizational unit, whereas it is controlled by a point called payroll area. In SAP, payroll area is a uniquely identifiable grouping which is represented in the HR master data of every staff member, and that determines which payroll area will be running the payroll for that particular staff member. As of today, in cluster 3, we have 4 major payroll areas: Americas, which is in headquarters New York; Africa, which is in Yunnan, Nairobi; Europe, right now it is in Geneva; and Asia, right now in ESCAP, Bangkok. In cluster 4, we will definitely have more payroll areas, or probably the payroll areas will be adjusted in such a way it can come up with a one homogeneous design. On the HRPA side, the standalone entity, the example is MINUSTA, where the standalone entity roles are assigned at the higher level of MINUSTA, such as HR partner in MINUSTA, and within entity roles such as the OM administrators and the time managers are assigned at the lower level or the departments or unit levels. The next model is the Operation Center model. An example is, as I said, it is Nairobi Operating Center, comprising of UNON, UN Habitat, and UNEP and IFAN. And all the staff members underneath are managed by a set of group of people who have been assigned with what is called an Operation Center enterprise roles. And there are certain roles which are still controlled by entity, and there are certain roles which are controlled within the entity. Please remember, when an Operation Center model kicks in, there are certain rules which are applied at the operations center will not be available for entity level applications. The entity level application and the operational level applications are mutually exclusive the moment the model is decided and applied. The optimal design implementation as per SAP's construct is, if you have an operations center or a service delivery center, you have a collection of entities, and those entities will be managed by the operations center. And the staff from anywhere in the Umoja system can be a part of this operations center, and the assignment is always at the higher level at the entities. And it also provides you the built-in redundancy in the sense a set of operations center members will be managing all the 4 entities. So if in case one person is not available in the office, automatically the other person can pick up his or her job. This particular model is scalable and sustainable. Once you have an operations center and later point in time you want to add another entity, it is as simple as that, adding an entity under the operations center. So whoever has the role of operations center will automatically grandfather the new entity which got into the system as under this operations center. For example, the Nairobi Operations Center, which is a group of HRMS staff from UNON been assigned, and they control and manage the UNON, UNUP, Habitat, and IFAD. And all HR functions, including personal action, PAC, which is the personal action and contracts, and entitlements are taken care by the group of HR partner professionals. And they also manage the access and the workflow in the sense they can access all the employees or belonging to the entities below them, and any request originating from the staff member belonging to those entities will be routed to the Nairobi Operating Center HR partners. Please remember, the moment the model comes in, there will not be an HR partner role at the entity level in UNON, UNUP, UNHabitat, or IFAD. It is always applied at the Operations Center level. If things were very clean, things were very straight, and things are followed as per the benchmark practices, our presentation would have stopped here. However, we have what is called design challenges. For example, the Bangkok Operations Center, I'm just picking up the name for ESCAP here, they manage ESCAP and ESCAP duty stations. And staff from any entity can sit in Bangkok Operations Center to manage those entities under them. Then comes the design challenges. There are certain entities which are managed by ESCAP or the Bangkok Operations Center at Bangkok, namely DMOICT or the Bangkok functionality of the OCHA or unit, or the UNEP's Bangkok operative set of people. How do you manage them? If I ask you a question, which organization in the world which would try to exercise the maximum control on all the processes at the same time to have all possible exceptions on all those controlled processes? I don't have to answer that. It is nothing but United Nations, and Umoja is a project which is going to maneuver that complexity. It is like a yin yang. You have the passive negative force and the yang, which is active and positive force. According to the Chinese theory, these forces are not supposed to be considered opposing as against. They should be considered as complementing, and we need to understand and we need to devise a solution, which is what we have done. In Umoja, we have came up with what is called the service delivery model, Umoja enabled options. There were three options which were suggested. One is the enhanced model for service delivery, or managed model for service delivery, and an exception model. And very simple reason on the naming, we wanted to cut short what is an exception model, because in any re-engineering process, the moment you bring in an exception, the exception will have a life of its own. So we need to obliterate the exception, and that's what we did. So we didn't want to even go to that option. So let's tackle the other two, tackle the issue with the other two options. The Bangkok Operations Center with the entities not belonging to them can be managed by the enhanced delivery model. The enhanced delivery model forces you to have the budget structure which is equal to the operative structure. In the sense, the DMOACT, OCHA Bangkok, and UNAP Bangkok will be brought under ESCAP as the organizational units, and they will behave as if a part of ESCAP. With that, the access and the workflow is exactly the same. The Bangkok Operations Center staff members will have access to all these subunits. At the same time, any staff requisition originating from OCHA or UNAP Bangkok will be routed to Bangkok Operating Center. From an IT system point of view, this is one of the easy and simple solution. However, the business may not like it because it skews your budget structure. So now what do? We do not want to skew the budget structure. At the same time, we want to understand how this can be solved, and that takes to our number 2 of the option, which is called managed service delivery. In the managed service delivery, we wanted to decouple budget structure and operative structure. A Bangkok Operations Center as a budgetary structure will have ESCAP and ESCAP duty station. However, the operative model will show the DMOICT, OCHA Bangkok, and UNAP Bangkok. Remember, the DMOICT and OCHA Bangkok, UNAP Bangkok, they are also tied to the parent org unit by the virtue of an entity component. In the sense, the HDG, which is the New York Operating Center, will be still having control of DMOICT staff members. The Nairobi operating center will have control on UNEP, and the Geneva operating center might have the control on the OCHA Bangkok, depending upon the case. So what also we did smartly was we decoupled the access and the workflow, in the sense, if you take DMOICT as an example, the DMOICT staff members will be controlled both by HTG group as well as the Bangkok Operations Center group in terms of access. However, in terms of workflow, when a staff member under that org unit create a requisition which needs to be routed to the HR partner, it will only be routed to Bangkok Operating Center and it will not go to HTG. So in that way, so we have three variations. One, the budget structure was delinked from the operative structure, and an operative structure was created as a pseudo structure which overlays on the budgetary structure. And number three is the access and the workflow are decoupled. So with this, we have got one clean design solution where the entities are put together in operative structures such as UNON, and we have two possible solutions for the design challenges where you are going to have an entity managing a couple of entities, also a part of other entities. With this, we move on to the next is an example of operative structures which differs based on the processes. Let's take RSCE for example, the Regional Service Center in Entebbe and its client missions. When you look at the structures, the structure is pretty simple because we are going to go only by operative structure because there is a budgetary structure for RSCE as a business area by itself, and it is supporting the client missions such as MINUSCA, UNSOA, and MONUSCO, etc. So the people or the HR partners who will be assigned the RSCE Operations Center roles can come from any entity. They can stay in Entebbe or they can physically located in any of the client mission, will still have the role of Operative Center HR partner. In that sense, they can manage all the client missions including RSCE. And remember, the moment we go into the RSCE Operations Center role, you will not have HR partner roles at the client mission level. And this is the operative structure for HR. And then look at UNSOA. UNSOA is a client mission where all the HR functions will be managed at the Entebbe level. But when it comes to travel, UNSOA behaves differently. UNSOA becomes the master and it services the other three organizational entities as their client missions. So any client request related to travel from UNSOM will automatically route to UNSOA for service. But let's put this in a perspective, okay? I take a travel process which cuts across both financial as well as the HR functionality. A staff member, when they create a travel request, it goes to the travel and shipment approving officer, and then it goes to the travel processing office for the ticketing and approval of the trip. When the request is an HR request, the request will be routed to the HR partner and then routed back to the travel and shipment approver. And if the request has a shipping request, it will go to the shipment office, and the shipping processing office then get routed to the travel and shipment approving officer. And after all approval, the trip happens, and then the expense claim is recorded by the staff member or by the administrator. This is a very, very simplistic expression of a travel management. I'm sure you all will appreciate the complexity underneath that, but for understanding the service delivery model, I picked up the very simple model. Assuming in this case, the staff member is creating a travel request for a budget belonging to UNSOA, the model will behave like this. The request is created by UNSOM, staff member or an administrator in UNSOM because it is the within client role, and then it goes to UNSOA for certification because the certification, the coding block is belonging to UNSOA, and the travel processing office is also UNSOA, which is in Nairobi. But if it is an HR related, the HR partner for this particular travel request will be residing in RSCE. And when it comes to the shipment part, it's all taken over by UNSOA, and also the expense part is also taken care by the UNSOA. So now, the extension of the service delivery model with respect to the processes gives you a lot of flexibility in orchestrating your business process. However, it also brings in a lot of complexity in understanding the process as a whole, and also a lot of training is required to track and trace documents when they are operationalized. Remember, the flexibility is the power, and the power comes with a responsibility factor as well. In this case, more training and more coherent approach in adopting these service delivery models. Then we extend the same operative structure to Geneva. This will look like something here. And again, this is based on the information available as on today, right now. And when you make a decision, these things might change a little bit. One other tricky part in when it comes to Geneva Operating Center is the entities such as OCHA. The OCHA is an entity by itself in cluster 3 right now, and now it will be divided into multiple components. It could be an OCHA New York component, which will be managed by the HTG group, an OCHA Geneva component, which will be managed by the GOC in Geneva, and OCHA outlier components such as OCHA, which is in Bangkok, can be managed by Bangkok or Geneva, depending upon the case, as we explained in our previous slides. On the same note, when we go into the operative structure of HTG New York, which is a New York operating center type of a business, which will also follow exactly the same thing. And again, remember, the OCHAs and DESAs and DPIs have a very geographically distributed framework. So a better understanding of the service delivery model, better understanding of the design possibilities, and better understanding of the design constraints is highly recommended. And this perspective is what going to make your role mapping, and not only role mapping, and after go live, user provisioning and controlling and managing and maintaining these top-notch transactional processes. As we started, now I'm going to explain the transformation framework, which we discussed with the OHRM leadership back in 2012, and what we have accomplished. In 2012, when I met with the chief of HR, we came up with this 3-point agenda, is to understand the starting point and the transformational objectives, and strategic business understanding, and also the current state of organizational maturity. And based on that, we decided the future state should be a set directions for the design, which we did, and develop a service delivery model, which we did, and develop governance and support structure, which is happening as we speak. And the transformational roadmap, which we did, was design the future state structure, process, and technology, and align it by milestone. And we devised 4 milestones, started with a pilot implementation in Minusta. And again, after all this understanding of the rollouts, we did a corrective measures in pilot after a couple of months, and then we went live with cluster 3, and as a 4th milestone we have a cluster 4. And again, this is a milestone based on the current and future state of what we decided to go live with the headquarters and the cluster 4 entities. As we all know, pacing and sequencing of the rollout of the new HR delivery service model is always critical, and it all based on the understanding of the start and end points. And the end point here in this particular project is the cluster 4, and we have already came to the journey in delivering the service delivery model and the options. And with that, I take you to the moment of Zen. I want to express that I do not have any political affiliation nor any political favoritism in any which form. But I would like to take the statement of our ex-Defense Secretary, Donald Rumsfeld, where he stated, "You go to the war with the army you have, and they are not the army you might want or wish to have at a later point in time." With that, I conclude my presentation, and now I take you back to the blue marble, and I'm sure your perspective must have changed. So did your perspective towards the Umoja project and the service delivery model. And thanks for watching. It's always a pleasure. For more information and questions, send me a note and keep watching this channel. Thanks and bye.